Welcome. My name is Julie Rogers Bascom, and I'm the Director of Learning and Leadership at the National Youth Leadership Council. We're here today to talk about how we can use service learning to reach social emotional learning outcomes. I welcome you all to this conversation, and I'm really hoping that the stories and the examples that we share will help you identify and demonstrate what it looks like to use service learning and to build social emotional learning skills. And I hope that this begins an opportunity for us to continue to share how we are all doing this work. There are a couple of different opportunities for us to do some interaction. While this is a recorded webinar, there will be some people who will be watching this not live. So there is, stay tuned for the very end, because there is a way for us to connect and keep having a conversation about how we're doing this work, how the intersection between service learning and social emotional learning is alive and well. So we will be doing a couple of different interactions. A little bit about NYLC. We're a national nonprofit based in St. Paul, Minnesota, where it is snowing right now. I look at our work as three buckets. We have that bucket of helping young people develop leadership skills and become the people that they want to become to create change. So we work with young people. We work with schools to support teachers and by using service learning. And then we also support the field of service learning and provide opportunities for teachers to grow through our resource center, through our service learning conference, which is upcoming. Just a quick bit, we're really excited to talk a little bit about our 40th anniversary. We've been doing this work for 40 years. In 1983, NYLC was founded by Jim Kielsmeyer, and originally it was in response to tension caused by court-mandated school integration. Throughout its history, NYLC's work has centered around young people making meaningful change happen. Some of our youth adult efforts include Youth as Solutions, which is a program that we work with teams of young people and adults to use service learning as that strategy to create change. We have a Project Ignition initiative, and that's about teen driver safety. A program called Poder en Salud, which is translated into Power and Health, to really support the Latino community in how COVID has been impacting and what young people are doing to address those issues. We have our podcast, The Power of Young People to Change the World. And that's really an exciting time to hear from young people about some of the work that they're doing. You can find those resources on our website. And I'm also excited to remind you that there's still time to register for our National Service Learning Conference. We are headed to Nashville in the next couple of weeks, where we'll be meeting with other folk, young people and adults, to learn from each other and to share some of the experiences and the good and important work that we are doing around the country, actually around the world, because we do have some international folks that are joining us. So again, nylc.org, that's where you can find a lot of these resources. We'll be putting some things in the chat as we continue on, so we can make sure that you have access to those resources. Now, I told you we'd have a quick little interaction. Speaking at you is not something that is always, I like to have some kind of engagement. So one of the strategies I use on a lot of our online training is a platform called Slido. What you do is you go to slido.com and you type in those numbers, or if you have a QR reader, hover over that QR code and it'll take you to that site where you can answer these questions. I want to know from you, why did you come to this workshop? What are you wondering about? What's great is I can see that some people are typing, so I know that this Slido is live. It's really important for us as we're doing this work is we want to be able to respond to what you're looking for. Social emotional learning is an important aspect. We're hearing, we're reading, we're learning a lot about SEL. I have to say, 15 years ago when I was working in a school district, one of the administrators came up to me and said, Julie, we don't need anything. We don't need to work on soft skills. We need to work on hard skills. And I think it's so interesting because I think that same administrator today might say, we need to look at those soft skills or social emotional learning skills. So someone typed in, came to this workshop to build knowledge of service learning, the potential for developing a program in my districts. Awesome, terrific. I'm a teacher educator looking at how tapping into SEL of college students via coursework and service learning can guide to their professional and academic aspirations. I think service learning is really one of those strategies that helps develop career awareness. And if you are in a service learning experience, in the actual experience of it, you are developing career readiness, career awareness, learning how the world works, developing skills. Someone's building a service learning program for primary and middle school. Absolutely, it's really important time. And service learning can and does happen in elementary, middle, high school, and higher ed. Somebody's designing an introductory high school service learning course. Absolutely, don't have a disciplinary home. I think service learning and social emotional learning is a great place to have an advisory because you can tap into some other of the academic skills. And I would, at the very end, I'll be sharing some resources that might help guide that. Kids' needs have changed a lot in the last few years. We have had, the young people in our world have been impacted, as we all have. So what are some of the strategies that we can use to address that? Service learning is a way to engage students from underrepresented backgrounds, yes. Someone is running an inner city youth program, and this might provide important resources for young people. I hope so. I think that's wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm going to just give it another minute or 30 seconds or so just to percolate, see if there's any other thoughts. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. So we'll move on. One of the things that I think is really important when we are considering community service, service learning, and social emotional learning is really to think about definitions. Words matter. If there are any English teachers out there, words matter. And I think it's important to understand some of the differences that in some of the definitions of terms that we use in service learning and social emotional learning. I start with talking about community service because there is sometimes confusion of what is community service, what is service learning. Community service, I define it as an activity that engages people in addressing needs of their community. Really, if there's schools in their communities, really important and good work. When I contrast that to service learning and its definition, service learning is an approach to teaching and learning where students use academic and civic knowledge and skills to address genuine needs. Now that's a mouthful, but so I'm going to pull out, I'm going to tease that out, sort of like a knot in a necklace. We'll tease that out a little bit. Service learning is an approach to teaching and learning. There are outcomes that we look at for young people compared to a service project where you show up or you do the activity. When it's tied to learning objectives, and learning doesn't always have to be, some of our learning objectives are social emotional learning. So that is really an important thing to keep in mind when you're designing your service learning experience. What is it that you want your young people to be able to know or do? And it's tying academic and civic to knowledge and skills. It's not only using what young people know, but it's also using new knowledge and applying it to that situation. And it's an opportunity to address genuine community needs. And I'll give you some examples in a little bit where sometimes we are addressing something that might not be a genuine need. So therein lies a few distinctions between community service and service learning. Again, there is a role for each. I hear that some of you are coming to this webinar because you're looking for educational strategies. Those of you who are in programs, out of school programs, and we welcome you, I think there's a lot of learning to be connected to that service learning experience. Notice I say experience. There's a lot of learning, leadership, life skills, connecting to what they're learning in the classroom. So it's rich opportunity for our young people to grow and develop. Now, the third definition, what is social emotional learning? I often refer to the CASEL definition, and I didn't put it down here because it's very, very large, but it's a very long definition. CASEL, I think, is a fabulous place to get great information and great resources. Their definition is that social emotional learning is the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage emotions, and achieve personal and collective goals. They feel and show empathy for others. They establish and maintain supportive relationships and make responsible and caring decisions. Again, a long definition. So what I did was compact that down and just talk about three components of it. Manage emotions, problem solve, create positive relationships with others. Social emotional learning is a vast, and it might sound overwhelming, but the work that we do in a service learning experience really ties to a lot of what we've been talking about. I use their logo over here because I think it's a real good reminder of the competencies and the different areas with which to grow and develop that. Now, there's lots of research and reports that have been considering social emotional learning, and I call this one out. It's called Ready to Engage. And in this report, it was a report by Civic in partnership with Hart Research Associates. This report found, and I quote from this report, both parents and teachers endorse a holistic view of education and student success that includes social emotional learning and service learning. They believe that service learning and social emotional learning have a reciprocal, mutually reinforcing relationship. And they also report the implementation of social emotional learning and service learning opportunities in school lag behind demand, and especially those opportunity gaps exist in rural and low income students, for rural and low income students. So we are hearing in the community, and teachers and parents are really wanting to see service learning and social emotion learning. How do we integrate that? I would say the intersection between the two of them, that if you're doing high quality service learning, you can't not already be including social emotional learning. So it's happening if you're following stages of service learning in the IPARD cycle, and we'll get into that next. But if you're following the protocols for high quality service learning, you are addressing social emotional learning because it is wrapped into that process of service learning. So high level overview, the 4 stages of service learning. This is really a backwards design protocol. So we encourage teachers, facilitators, youth workers to identify the desired results. What is it that you want young people to be able to know or do? Is it academic? Is it civic? Is it Common Core? Is it leadership? Is it a career and college readiness? What is it that you want young people to be able to achieve, know, experience. That stage 2 is really about determining acceptable evidence. How will you know that that has been received? How will you know if young people have reached those goals? That stage 3, that's the student learning cycle. We call it the IPARD process. Excuse me. And IPARD stands for investigation, planning and preparing, action, reflection, and demonstration. So those are the 5 steps in that student learning cycle. We're going to talk a little bit more about each of those steps because I think that aligns well to some of the ways that social emotional learning happens in those stages. That 4th stage is really about self-assessment, both from the adult and for the young person. What did you do? How did you learn? What needs to change? And sometimes what still needs to be done. So again, this is really the guts. This is the guts of a service learning experience for a young person. And this is where social emotional learning comes from. Let's start with the I of the IPARD process, investigation. In investigation, young people are digging into what is a community need. How are they identifying what is a problem in their community? And they're learning about it. They're either researching on the internet, they're interviewing people, they're taking surveys, they're making observations, they're understanding more about the issue that they want to address. And I think that's really important to start there rather than starting with a project. Oftentimes, and I think oftentimes when we're new to service learning, we start with a project. And I'm here to say, that's okay, that's really okay. How can you step back and encourage young people to learn more about the issue that is underlying that project, or the issue that the project is addressing, because that's the connection to the learning and the opportunity to understand and use critical thinking skills. Yep, that is a social emotional learning skill, critical thinking, because we want them to develop problem solving skills. So the investigations part of the IPARD cycle, when young people are investigating community needs, they're becoming more socially aware. So I go back to Castle's pedagogy, and they're talking about self-awareness and they're talking about social awareness at this point. But I also think it's an opportunity for self-awareness, because that in that investigation stage, that is also a place where young people can identify their skills, talents, and interests. Oftentimes we look to the group and ask young people to practice or grow some of their skills. I once worked with a group of young people who, one young person said that they were working on a brochure. One young person was going to research, because that's what she's really good at. One young person said that he was really a great drawer, so he would help draw the brochure and the illustrations. The next young person said, well, I'm really good at running. And I thought, where are you going with this? And he said, well, I'll go run around and deliver all those brochures. So it's an opportunity for young people to really identify their personal strengths and their interests. Planning and preparing, that's the next step. Now you know what you've done your investigation. Now you've identified the step, the action that you'd like to take. You're starting to plan and prepare. Young people have, with their adult partners, have created SMART goals. I connect that to self-management and social awareness and relationship building skills, because oftentimes in these planning and preparation stages, when young people are creating budgets or making phone calls to arrange things for an event or an opportunity, they are having to work in groups of people. So it's an opportunity to build those relationship building skills. I also think when we go into that next phase, after planning and preparing, the action phase, I think there's opportunities to reach all of those goals, all of those competencies. So I won't spend a whole lot more time on that, but I want you to think about that because I'm curious how you are seeing that happen in your space. Our next step in the IPARD process is reflection. We talk about reflection before, during, and after. One of the things that young people and the adults that support them are engaged in are some kind of assessment, some kind of reflection, maybe a Google form. This also ties to self and social awareness. When you're thinking about how you are feeling about an issue, and that might be from, let me take an example of young people visiting a senior center. That preparation before is really important. We might ask, especially if it's a group of youngers, of the little ones, we might ask, what are you expecting to see? What are you expecting something to be? Like, what are you worried about? Have you ever been at a senior? What was your past experience? So they're tapping into that self-awareness, but it's an opportunity to tap into some of that social awareness. Why are people in senior facilities? What kind of health issues do they have? What are some of their needs? How do you tie that into empathy? We know that reflection done regularly can actually tap into learning capacity. And when I heard that statistic, I was a little blown away. Learning capacity, reflection and learning capacity. So again, reflection really taps into self-awareness. It can tap into relationship building and that social awareness. It's an opportunity to tap into all of those competencies. Then the last phase of our IPARD cycle is demonstration. What are you doing to share with the community, with your school, with the world? What did you do? How did you serve? What kind of impact you made? In some kind of a demonstration, which is sort of the wrapping up, it's almost like the namaste after a yoga class, where you seal that practice, where you seal the experience, the service learning experience. When young people are creating an event, they are having to do a lot of planning and make decisions and work with relationships with others. And they might run into some problems with, how maybe they're having trouble getting things online. Who are they going to talk to? Is it frustrating? It's an opportunity to manage emotions. So certainly lots of opportunities during that IPARD cycle to consider how you are increasing social emotional learning with young people. Now, one of the things that I think is important for us to remember is we call these the standards of quality service learning. These are indicators, research-based indicators of what makes service learning have more impact for young people. Again, I reflect back onto that first stage of our service learning, the phases of service learning. What is it that we want young people to be able to know or do? These 8 standards of quality service learning are a guide for you to consider how to dig deeper, add some more elements to have more impact for young people. Please know that not everybody, if each one of these standards was on a Likert scale, it's really hard to have 5 on all of those. But I think it serves as a guide to consider how to take this deeper and make it more meaningful for young people and to have greater impact on them as learners as they are growing, but also in the community. I'm going to start with the first standard, meaningful service. Meaningful service meaning it's important. It is a necessary. It means something to the community. That it's something that the community would recognize needs to be done, and hopefully that has been identified through the investigation stage. I use this one example a lot because it helps to qualify. It helps us to understand how easy it is for us to take action without thinking about whether it's meaningful or not. As I mentioned, I live in Minnesota where it's cold and snowy, and one of the things that a lot of our young people do is they make blankets, tie blankets, those fleece blankets. We make tie blankets for homeless shelters and for senior centers and for other spaces that have a need. This one particular community, this one classroom, actually it was a group of parents who encouraged young people and the teacher that the class that they were in, I think they were sixth graders, the parents said, we'll get the fabric, and you do it in your classroom. The kids were making the blankets. They had a lot of fun. Important, good service learning doesn't have to be a drag. It can be fun. There's a lot of opportunity for engagement with young people. The parents delivered the blankets to the homeless shelter, and the homeless shelter went, oh, thanks. Lots of different different ways to dig into this, but the parents came back and said, seemed like they didn't want that. Following year, I reflected on this story with the teacher, and I said, let's dig a little deeper. Why don't you have your young people do some investigation on this homeless shelter and find out a little bit more. Young person called the homeless shelter, and the volunteer director was asked, it seemed like you didn't like these blankets. What's the deal? And she said, we love that young people want to be engaged in addressing some of the issues that our clients are facing, but you made the blankets the wrong size. The young people and their parents had bought a yard of fabric, but that's not big enough for the people who are sleeping on the mats in a homeless shelter. So while well-intended, it did not meet a genuine community need. But this, I use this as an example when I think about social emotional learning competencies. I think that this was really an opportunity for the young people to do some problem solving, to dig deep, and to understand even that one kind of misstep. It was an opportunity to solve problems and make different decisions. The next standard, I'll briefly talk about linked to curriculum, and I would actually, if I could wave a magic wand, I would say linked to learning, because it's not always academic curriculum. I like to see that if we're in classrooms and we're in schools, let's link it to the curriculum so we can do a 2-for-1. I don't like to say kill 2 birds with 1 stone, so I say feed 2 birds with 1 scone. I think that classrooms have so much going on, so many things to accomplish. So let's figure out how to make this experience, the service learning experience, reach some of those standards. I think when we link to learning and leadership, I think that aligns with self-awareness. And it also helps tie into problem solving, because I know that a lot of our standards in the classrooms are really looking at figuring out, developing that critical thinking process. Reflection. I talked about reflection before, during, and after in the previous slide. So again, I think that there's so much to link to self-management and self-assessment and social awareness when you're asking good and deep questions, and not just asking questions, but finding other ways for reflection. Diversity is a standard of quality service learning. And while we often talk about racial diversity when we're talking about DEI, I also want you to consider, when you think about that standard, as diverse perspectives. How do we encourage young people to think about different perspectives? There's this story that I often tell about a group of 7th graders. They were dealing with the impact of human behavior on the environment, and they were addressing the issue of water quality. They had done a walkabout on their school grounds and realized this was February, where there was a lot of water melting, and the water that was melting, you could see the salt. We use salt around Minnesota so we don't slip and fall. They could see that there was salt going into the water, and the water was going down into the storm drain. The storm drain, they knew, was going down to the creek behind the school. They knew this because of their investigation stage, and they had talked to experts, and they had talked to watershed district people. So they did their investigation. When they saw this, they actually saw a lot of salt around the sidewalks of the school, and it really concerned them. So they decided they were going to go talk to the custodians and tell them not to put salt in on the sidewalks anymore, because that was damaging the water quality of the creek behind the school. So we invited the custodians, and I had explained what the scenario was. So they were going in with information, and they felt real prepared. And so the young people decided, they said, we want you to stop using salt on the sidewalks. And the custodian said, well, what would happen if we didn't? I mean, just last week, somebody fell and broke their hip. So we use salt to prevent, for prevention. And let me tell you how we measure the salt and how we mix it with other materials, so it's not so damaging. The young people hadn't thought about that. They actually left there going, I hadn't thought about that before. So again, this diversity standards, when you're building in multiple perspectives, it's an opportunity for social awareness and for positive relationships and for problem solving. So another opportunity to think about how social emotional learning is embedded into this process. Youth voice, which I think I'll go back on this slide someday and put that into bold letters, because I think that is one of the qualities of service learning, the standards of service learning, that I think is really important, and sometimes often the hardest for us as adults to do, to really allow young people to lead. But youth voice, it's the difference between telling a class we're going to go clean up a river and walking around a classroom or a schoolyard and asking them what needs to be changed, asking the young people what do they see as a problem in their community. And I think that aligns real well with social awareness, self-management, relationship building skills. So again, the cycle, the process with which we lay out quality service learning experiences automatically aligns with social emotional learning. The next standard, partnerships, a story about one of those groups from that same experience with the young people deciding that the issue was about water quality. The group of, they were 7th grade boys, decided that they were going to go to City Hall, their local City Hall, and ask for new regulations, for a regulation for new construction. They wanted a rule to be set into place that 10% of all new construction in this city had permeable surfaces. So in 7th grade, I didn't know what permeable was. They were paying attention. They'll always know what permeable means now. But so they made their presentation about the importance of new regulation. So I think that demonstrates kind of that social awareness. And they had an opportunity to manage their emotions because it was not accepted. It was not put forward. What did happen is that the city came back and said the following year, we want to hear from young people. We want to hear what they're concerned about. So it did have an impact in that regard, but in terms of a social emotional learning aspect, those young people were pretty disappointed, and it was an opportunity for them to think about, okay, what's next? What? So what? Now what? Another reflection opportunity. The final two the final two standards are often tied in more with the youth leader or the teacher. We're progress monitoring. We're looking at assessment. How are we doing? Are we following protocol? I think there is opportunity for us, for young people, to experience those social emotional learning skills. I like to think about how young people can be involved in that progress monitoring or that assessment. The same with duration intensity. We know that with a service learning experience, it has more impact if it's not just a one and done. If you're tying it to some of these standards and you're tying it to the process, it's going to take a little bit longer, and it's also going to have different and the kinds of outcomes that you hope. So this is my standard slide. Service learning is a process, not a project. I've been talking a lot, and that's usually, this is the time where I like some interaction. I'm going to show you a brief little video from Mr. Rogers, and I think that this is kind of encapsulates us, gives us an opportunity to blend service learning and social emotional learning. So I'm going to quick play this short video.
I'm very concerned that our society is much more interested in information than wonder, in noise rather than silence. How do we do that? I mean, in our business, yours and mine, how do we encourage reflection? I trust that this book will do some of that, but oh my, this is a noisy world.
Now,
Oh my, this is a noisy world. And I think this was Mr. Rogers' way of asking us to consider the importance of social emotional learning. I'm going to run through, let that sit for a minute, huh? I'm going to run through just a couple of different resources, as I had mentioned that I would do, and then ask you for some reflection questions, an opportunity for us to reflect. Just a shout out, we do have a Summer Educator Institute happening with NYLC. I'll be doing a 3-day Educator Institute and also a Jumpstart in August. The 3-day in June, the one short little Jumpstart in August. And there's more information on our website. I think, Miranda, thank you. You've been plugging some resources or some links in the chat. If you're watching this as a recording, you can go to nylc.org/events. And some other resources that might be of interest and of use to you. Here's a book, kind of you're getting started, a primer on what is service learning. It covers a lot of what we talked about today. And again, service learning in 45 minutes, that's a lot to go through. So lots of information, but this is a great tool for you to take a look at and dig in a little deeper. There's a unit plan organizer, there's some other resources and some other information that I think you might find interesting. It's really for teachers and practitioners walking through fillable PDFs and some examples. The next group of resources I want to call your attention to is a series of resources we call the Engage books. They are handbooks that are created for after-school service learning programs, but I actually have worked with a lot of teachers who are using these because it is really a step-by-step different sessions, and it takes you through the IPARD process. So there are activities, there's a beginning activity, there's a content activity, and there's an end reflection or an exit ticket. So there are, it's real simple activities. These are not about a specific topic. So it's an opportunity for your class, your group to come up with their own. And these books are also, these handbooks, there's 3 different levels. There's elementary, middle, and high school. So this is a great way to dip your toe in and to have some resources. And if you're a classroom teacher, look at some of these activities and see if you might be able to read those, whether you're elementary, middle, or higher ed. There's some great exercises and activities in these 3 books. The next series of books are the Sustainable Development Goals books, and these are actually focused. We have, I believe, 8 of them. They're focused on the Sustainable Development Goals, and these again are process-oriented, the same kind of 14 weeks lesson. You can make them as lessons. So if you're an out-of-school program, they were created for out-of-school programs so they could kind of run a summer worth of service learning. I forgot to mention the previous ones, the Engage and the SDGs, also have identified some of the service or the social emotional learning goals that you will achieve through that experience. So it's kind of a way for you to take a look at, oh, if you're wanting to build more self-awareness, there are some activities in there, or there are some sessions that really address that. Here's what I'd like you to consider. I do a lot of reflection, and today I'm asking you to go to this website, or to this link. It's a Padlet link, or take your phone and head to the QR code, read the QR code in the top right corner, and head to that page. And let me know some of your thoughts. This is also an opportunity to put down how you are using service learning to reach SEL outcomes, and to connect with maybe other people if you would like to. There is no requirement to put name or whatever, but it's a way for the people who are here today or who are watching to take a moment and connect and read what other people are doing, how they are using service learning to reach SEL outcomes. So we're going to leave that up for just a moment or so, especially so you have an opportunity to connect with that. And then I will leave you with my contact information. Again, I'm Julie Rogers-Bascom, Director of Learning and Leadership here at NYLC. I look forward to continuing to connect with you, either through our Padlet or through other experiences. Maybe I'll see you at the conference. Maybe you'll come to some of our other webinars. If you are interested in keeping in touch with us, sign up for our newsletter, because it'll give you an up-to-date pulse on the other kinds of work that we are doing. And I think Miranda is able to put that into the chat. Again, thank you so much. It's been an honor and a privilege to be with you, either in person or virtually.